The month that he spent in the hospital, they did so many more tests. He saw specialists, and they couldn't give us a diagnosis. They didn't know what the specific problem was. What they ended up telling us was that he had progressive motor neuron disease, which is like telling somebody you have cancer. There's so many different types of cancers and different treatments. So we really didn't know specifically what we were dealing with. But while he was in the hospital, they told him that whatever he had, it was terminal. He's going to die from it. I believe they gave him 6 months to 2 years was what they said. In 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, it was the end of February, beginning of March, and I remember everything got really quiet. And I had just taken a leave of absence from my job so they could provide 24-hour care to my husband, who was on hospice. His condition had declined, and he entered into kind of the final part of his decline. And I remember the hospice nurse coming to our house and telling me that it was time to call our adult kids home because the end was very near. And that was difficult. And so I called them, and our whole family gathered around in our home. And I think one of the really hard parts was helping our 6-year-old. Our youngest was only 6 at the time. And to help him cope with the impending loss of his dad, and to help him to understand it. God, I didn't even know how you help a child of that age to understand somebody so close to them dying. I had been grieving him for a long time because we knew this was supposed to be coming. And it's really odd to grieve somebody while they're still living. I can't really explain it. It's just very difficult. And it was really an intense, quiet period of time. It became kind of a sacred time, actually, for our family to just be together and support one another. Yeah. Sacred, yes. I've been a nurse for a long time, and I've been with many patients when they're dying, and I really believe that to be present with somebody while they're dying is an incredible gift and a blessing, despite how difficult it is. I think it's a blessing on both sides. Beginning of the story for us started in August of 2018 when we noticed that my husband had some mild hand tremors. We didn't really think it was anything too significant, but we knew he should get it checked out. And he did. Well, over the next 6 to 8 months, his symptoms multiplied really rapidly. We couldn't keep up with it. He was seeing doctors, getting tests, and everything. It's all a slow process. It takes so many months to get to this specialist. It takes a month to get in and do that test. And probably by about January, we realized that this was something really serious, even though we didn't know what it was. And I remember at one point my husband telling me that he said, I feel like this, whatever this is, I'm going to die from it. And there wasn't really anything during those first 6 to 8 months that required us to go to the hospital. But we knew that that's what it was going to take. We were like, we just have to wait for an emergency to happen, a crisis to happen. And then we can go to the hospital, and hopefully that will expedite things. So that happened on Easter of 2019. My husband laid down for a nap, and when he woke up, he could barely walk. So I helped him get to the emergency room. And when we got there, he ended up being in the hospital for a month. And all of the things that we feared became reality. He completely lost his ability to walk within 24 hours of being in the hospital. He continued to decline and waste away. I could literally see his muscles just disappearing. And we received a terminal prognosis, not diagnosis. They were not able to give us a diagnosis while he was in the hospital. And that began the next part of a really difficult journey. And we knew at this time, we knew it was going to be hard. We had no idea really what to expect. But we knew that we had to rely very heavily on God because we could not do this on our own. When I read this Sunday's gospel, I thought of how Mary, just finding out that she's pregnant, and also finding out that her elderly cousin is pregnant for the first time, she immediately goes to her cousin. She becomes the first Christ bearer. And on our journey, I thought about how many people were Christ bearers to me and my family, and what a difference it made on our journey. Within the first few days of my husband being in the hospital, I knew that he was not walking home. He was coming home in a wheelchair. And our home has several steps into it. And for whatever reason, this weighed so heavily on me in that first week, because I don't know how to build a wheelchair ramp, and I had no idea who to call. Like, who do you call to build a wheelchair ramp? I need to get this. I didn't know he was going to be in the hospital for a whole month, so there was a bit of urgency. And I didn't share this with my husband because he's in the hospital fighting for his life, and he has other concerns. But it weighed on me heavy. Well, within a couple of days, I get a call from Deacon John. And he says to me, this other guy and I, we go and we do projects for people where there's a need. And if it's okay with you, we would really like to come to your house and build a wheelchair ramp. He'd been to our home, so he knew what the front of our home looked like. I remember at first, even though he was in a wheelchair, he could still do a lot of things for himself. And I remember telling him, oh, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this for years, we can do this for a long time. We're good. Well, just like the first part of the journey, that's not how it went. He declined. He continued to decline very rapidly. So while he was dealing with losing more and more of his independence, more and more things he couldn't do for himself, and he was dealing with his own mortality, facing his own death, I was working. We were both trying to help our 6-year-old to function from day to day and kind of keep some sort of normalcy. And again, I was already beginning to grieve my husband. This was a really difficult time. But there were so many people that came to us. I remember a meal train was set up, and this meal train went on for months. A couple of times a week, people would bring us home-cooked meals. Because everything, I provided more and more care for my husband, so more and more was put on my plate. It was hard. So this was a huge help. They would bring meals. People would come to our home. You know, at some point it became very difficult for my husband to get out of our home. So people would come and they would visit with us. They would cry with us. They would laugh with us. They would just be with us. They would pray with us. And I remember when my husband could no longer get to church, how much he wanted the Eucharist. And there were people who came to our home and brought Jesus literally to my husband. And that gave him both of us, a lot of comfort. The thing that I remember maybe the most, there were so many people praying for us. People here at St. Michael's Parish, people from St. Martin's Abbey, our friends, our family. And there were people we'll never meet. We had joined an online support group, and there were people there that would message me or message my husband with words of encouragement, or "We're praying for you." And I remember during this time, this whole journey, after my husband had been there home for 6 months, he ended up going on hospice, which was really hard because it made it a reality. His death was coming. And you know, there were moments when my husband and I, we were down here, we were devastated, we were in darkness. But those moments were really few and far between, and they didn't last very long. For the most part, we were able to sit up here in this place where we were still able to have joy, moments of joy, and our house was filled with peace. We had a sense of peace within us. When you get in these situations where there's so much deep sorrow and you're experiencing loss or you know you're going to, it can become difficult to pray. And I feel like in those moments is when you especially rely on other people to pray for you, to pray on your behalf. I remember that. So I remember the day my husband and I talked about it because you could feel it. It was palpable. I can't explain it, but you could just feel the prayers of so many people holding us up. And we needed that. Without that, we wouldn't have had joy. I don't think we would have been at peace. I think we would have been much existed down here in a devastated state, in a state where you can't move forward, where you can't do anything, in a state of darkness. That's the world's influence. That's where the world wants us. And that's why I think prayer is so important, because it puts us in the realm of the spiritual. It lifts us up to where we should be.
I didn't die. And somehow, by the grace of God, I lived. I don't know why. I've stopped asking why and have just given myself over to being and being here and giving thanks and praise for the miracle of the second chance at life. I think that was one of the most comforting moments, was to receive Jesus in the Eucharist and to have Eucharistic visitors bringing the church to me when I couldn't be in church. So here Christ was being brought to me, and what an honor. What an honor it was to have Jesus in the Eucharist in my home and calling upon that divine physician to heal me and to be with me. And it brought me great comfort knowing that here's a representative of the faithful of St. Michael's coming to our home to bring us Christ, to bring us church, to bring us their prayers on behalf of the entire community of St. Mike's, knowing that we have all of them offering up prayers, bringing meals, bringing the Eucharist, being just there to be with us during this time. Community was so important to us. Having a near-death experience and being that close to death and watching the family and the community being there for me, it put things into perspective. Or maybe I worked too much. Maybe I took my family for granted. Maybe I took health for granted. There were so many things that I didn't value as much until I had to have that experience. So I've slowed down. I've looked at my schedule in a different way, and everything that I do, it's giving back. It's for others. It's serving. It's not all about what I want anymore. It's more about what God wants, what my family wants, what my family needs, what people around me need. So it's profoundly changed my life in how I think and how I feel and how I see the world. What do you do? If you're a witness to a miracle, you're a part of a miracle, what do you do with that? We sat on it. I sat on it for the longest time. I was quiet about it. My spiritual director said, give thanks and praise and serve God every day. And it became so clear to me that what I needed to do is I needed to give back. That call resonated in me towards the diaconate, the ultimate way me as a married man can give back to the Holy Catholic Church, the way that I can fully give of myself to our parish, to our archdiocese, and to the church. This whole healing journey has led me to the diaconate, to where I can go and I could help minister to the marginalized, to those who are sick, to those who are dying, to those who are in need. I can help minister to them on a deeper, more profound way. I can bring more people to Christ by being a Christ bearer to others. So I'm listening for the call. I'm discerning the call. I continue to discern the call. I continue to say yes. I was very fortunate in this healing journey to have a doctor who had the time and had the compassion to look at everything in totality and put it all together and come up with, this strong diagnosis of, it's called eosinophilic granulomatosis with I can't even say it. So it's EGPA. It's a rare type of vasculitis. But my survival rate, now that we've identified it, now that we have an official diagnosis of what we're dealing with, my survival rate went up from 2% to 98%. My symptoms are being well managed. My health is improved. I'm not running any marathons anytime soon. I'm not building houses anytime soon. And I know that my entire, life has changed, and I have to embrace that, and I have to follow God's will. And while I'm not building houses or doing anything, physical hands-on labor, I can now minister, and I can my how I serve can change. It takes love to be there for somebody else. It takes love to serve somebody else. And it takes loving our neighbors and seeing Christ in others as we are Christ for others.
A Christ bearer is someone who brings you a little closer to heaven, because they bring Christ to you. They bring you joy, or they bring you peace or comfort. Anybody who wants to do the will of God, whether you know you're doing it or not, whether even if you have no idea what you're doing, it's just wanting to do something for another. Anybody can be a Christ bearer. We're all called to be Christ bearers. Yeah. And sometimes you might bring Christ to somebody and not even realize that you've done that. Everything we do can make a difference. Even the littlest thing, if it's done with great love, right? It becomes good.